Long before modern medicine and laws, there was a substance so powerful it reshaped empires and paralyzed civilizations. This is the story of opium. Take a moment, breathe, and imagine a time when a simple plant could ripple through the lives of kings, merchants, and ordinary people alike. Picture the markets of ancient cities, the quiet rituals of healers, and the bustling ports where exotic goods crossed oceans. Among these treasures was something that could soothe pain, ignite desire, and sometimes quietly unravel the very fabric of society. That treasure was opium, a tiny seed with extraordinary power. Some say opium's history is a tale of medicine. Others say it's a story of addiction and empire. In truth, it is both, and more, a gentle yet haunting reminder of how human ambition and curiosity can shape the world in ways both visible and hidden. As we journey together, notice how its influence threads through time like a soft, invisible river, sometimes calming, sometimes destructive, but always quietly present. So, settle in, let your mind drift, and allow the story of opium to unfold softly, like the turning of ancient pages. Before we dive into centuries of history, let's answer three simple questions. What is opium? Opium is the dried latex of the poppy plant. To many ancient peoples, it was a gift from the gods, both medicine and mystical experience. Farmers would gently score the poppy pods, collecting the resin that oozed forth. In small doses, it could relieve pain, calm the mind, or induce a dreamlike state. Over time, opium became more than just a remedy. It became a cultural companion, appearing in rituals, poetry, and medicine across continents. From Mesopotamia to Egypt, people learned how to harness its power, always with respect and sometimes with fear. How did it paralyze empires? You might wonder, how could a plant bring entire nations to their knees? The answer lies in its dual nature. Opium offered pleasure and pain relief, but it also carried addiction and dependence. Trade networks expanded its reach, carrying it from farm to market, from one continent to another. Empires grew rich selling it, yet struggled to contain its consequences. Wars erupted, economies faltered, and populations suffered. Its influence was subtle but persistent, like a slow-moving tide reshaping the shoreline over decades. Why should we care? Because opium's story is not just about a plant. It is a mirror reflecting human desire, the pursuit of wealth, and the fragile balance of societies. By tracing its path from ancient medicine to modern opioid debates, we gain insight into how choices, commerce, and curiosity can ripple across history, and even into our lives today. Its history reminds us that the smallest things, a single seed or a moment of indulgence, can leave echoes across centuries. Every journey begins with a single step, and ours begins with the seeds of civilization. Drift back thousands of years to the fertile lands of Mesopotamia, where early farmers first cultivated crops and healers experimented with natural remedies. It was here, in sun-warmed fields, that opium first entered human life, not as a tool of empires, but as a humble medicine. The Sumerians called it the joy plant, a simple phrase that speaks volumes about its place in their lives. In the soft glow of candlelight, priests and physicians would prepare small doses for the sick, whispering prayers for relief. Ancient texts describe how opium eased pain, calmed restlessness, and guided dreams. From Mesopotamia, knowledge traveled slowly, like a quiet river moving through villages and cities, shaping cultures as it went. Across the deserts of Egypt, opium found a new home. Egyptians used it in their intricate medical practices, combining it with other herbs to treat ailments of the body and mind. They noticed its power not only to relieve pain but to soothe grief, to soften the harsh edges of life. Mummies discovered thousands of years later reveal traces of opium, a silent testimony to its early role in human healing. By the time opium reached Greece and Rome, it had become more than medicine. Philosophers and physicians marveled at its effects. The Greeks experimented with it for pain relief, while poets and playwrights hinted at its dreamlike influence. Imagine the candlelit rooms where scholars wrote about the joys and dangers of this mysterious plant, debating its place in human life. The Romans, ever practical, used it both for medicine and culinary enhancement. Recipes combined opium with wine and honey, a soothing mixture that comforted the sick and inspired the healthy. Yet, alongside admiration, there was caution. Ancient doctors warned of its addictive potential, recognizing that pleasure and danger often travel hand in hand. As trade routes expanded, opium journeyed farther. The Silk Road carried it across deserts and mountains, from India to China, touching countless lives. Traders transported it alongside silk, spices, and precious metals, unaware that the plant they carried would one day influence politics, wars, and empires. By the time opium arrived in China, it had already been woven into the fabric of multiple civilizations, quietly shaping history with every dose, every trade, every ritual. Even in these early centuries, opium's story is clear. A small plant, nurtured and traded by humans, could touch the lives of kings and peasants alike. It was medicine, comfort, and fascination all at once, a reminder that the most unassuming things can ripple through time. As we step forward into China's ancient courts, British trade ambitions, and the Opium Wars that followed, remember this: the tale of opium is not just a history of a drug. It is a story of humanity itself, our desire, curiosity, and the subtle ways one small seed can shape the course of empires. Every great story begins somewhere small, and the story of opium begins in the quiet fields of ancient civilizations. Long before modern medicine and laws, there was a substance so powerful it reshaped empires and paralyzed civilizations. This is the story of opium. Take a moment, breathe, and imagine a time when a simple plant could ripple through the lives of kings, merchants, and ordinary people alike. Picture the markets of ancient cities, the quiet rituals of healers, and the bustling ports where exotic goods crossed oceans. Among these treasures was something that could soothe pain, ignite desire, and sometimes quietly unravel the very fabric of society. That treasure was opium, a tiny seed with extraordinary power. Some say opium's history is a tale of medicine. Others say it's a story of addiction and empire. In truth, it is both, and more, a gentle yet haunting reminder of how human ambition and curiosity can shape the world in ways both visible and hidden. As we journey together, notice how its influence threads through time like a soft, invisible river, sometimes calming, sometimes destructive, but always quietly present. So, settle in, let your mind drift, and allow the story of opium to unfold softly, like the turning of ancient pages. Before we dive into centuries of history, let's answer three simple questions. What is opium? Opium is the dried latex of the poppy plant. To many ancient peoples, it was a gift from the gods, both medicine and mystical experience. Farmers would gently score the poppy pods, collecting the resin that oozed forth. In small doses, it could relieve pain, calm the mind, or induce a dreamlike state. Over time, opium became more than just a remedy. It became a cultural companion, appearing in rituals, poetry, and medicine across continents. From Mesopotamia to Egypt, people learned how to harness its power, always with respect and sometimes with fear. How did it paralyze empires? You might wonder, how could a plant bring entire nations to their knees? The answer lies in its dual nature. Opium offered pleasure and pain relief, but it also carried addiction and dependence. Trade networks expanded its reach, carrying it from farm to market, from one continent to another. Empires grew rich selling it, yet struggled to contain its consequences. Wars erupted, economies faltered, and populations suffered. Its influence was subtle but persistent, like a slow-moving tide reshaping the shoreline over decades. Why should we care? Because opium's story is not just about a plant. It is a mirror reflecting human desire, the pursuit of wealth, and the fragile balance of societies. By tracing its path from ancient medicine to modern opioid debates, we gain insight into how choices, commerce, and curiosity can ripple across history, and even into our lives today. Its history reminds us that the smallest things, a single seed or a moment of indulgence, can leave echoes across centuries. Every journey begins with a single step, and ours begins with the seeds of civilization. Drift back thousands of years to the fertile lands of Mesopotamia, where early farmers first cultivated crops and healers experimented with natural remedies. It was here, in sun-warmed fields, that opium first entered human life, not as a tool of empires, but as a humble medicine. The Sumerians called it the joy plant, a simple phrase that speaks volumes about its place in their lives. In the soft glow of candlelight, priests and physicians would prepare small doses for the sick, whispering prayers for relief. Ancient texts describe how opium eased pain, calmed restlessness, and guided dreams. From Mesopotamia, knowledge traveled slowly, like a quiet river moving through villages and cities, shaping cultures as it went. Across the deserts of Egypt, opium found a new home. Egyptians used it in their intricate medical practices, combining it with other herbs to treat ailments of the body and mind. They noticed its power not only to relieve pain but to soothe grief, to soften the harsh edges of life. Mummies discovered thousands of years later reveal traces of opium, a silent testimony to its early role in human healing. By the time opium reached Greece and Rome, it had become more than medicine. Philosophers and physicians marveled at its effects. The Greeks experimented with it for pain relief, while poets and playwrights hinted at its dreamlike influence. Imagine the candlelit rooms where scholars wrote about the joys and dangers of this mysterious plant, debating its place in human life. The Romans, ever practical, used it both for medicine and culinary enhancement. Recipes combined opium with wine and honey, a soothing mixture that comforted the sick and inspired the healthy. Yet, alongside admiration, there was caution. Ancient doctors warned of its addictive potential, recognizing that pleasure and danger often travel hand in hand. As trade routes expanded, opium journeyed farther. The Silk Road carried it across deserts and mountains, from India to China, touching countless lives. Traders transported it alongside silk, spices, and precious metals, unaware that the plant they carried would one day influence politics, wars, and empires. By the time opium arrived in China, it had already been woven into the fabric of multiple civilizations, quietly shaping history with every dose, every trade, every ritual. Even in these early centuries, opium's story is clear. A small plant, nurtured and traded by humans, could touch the lives of kings and peasants alike. It was medicine, comfort, and fascination all at once, a reminder that the most unassuming things can ripple through time. As we step forward into China's ancient courts, British trade ambitions, and the Opium Wars that followed, remember this: the tale of opium is not just a history of a drug. It is a story of humanity itself, our desire, curiosity, and the subtle ways one small seed can shape the course of empires. How far can the gentle touch of a single plant reach? In antiquity, opium traveled across cultures, touching medicine, philosophy, and even the imagination itself. As civilizations grew and interconnected, opium quietly spread its influence, moving from the fields of Mesopotamia and Egypt to the lands of Greece and Rome. It was no longer just a local remedy. It became a companion to scholars, healers, and everyday people alike, offering calm, relief, and sometimes a glimpse into altered states of mind. In the ancient world, opium was both medicine and mystery, a plant that could soothe the body while opening doors to the imagination. In Greece, opium found a place among physicians and philosophers. The Greek physician Hippocrates, known as the father of medicine, recognized its pain-relieving properties. It was used in small doses to treat ailments ranging from coughs to digestive discomforts, and sometimes even as a sleep aid. But alongside its practical use, Greeks were fascinated by its more subtle effects. Writers and thinkers speculated on the dreamlike experiences it could inspire, pondering the delicate boundary between relief and intoxication. Opium was a companion to thought, a quiet helper in the exploration of the mind. Poets, too, took notice. In the quiet spaces of Greek homes, candles flickering against the walls, some would experiment with small amounts of opium to inspire their verse. The plant's calming influence sometimes led to visions, sometimes to reflections that lingered long after the effects faded. It became a subtle muse, encouraging contemplation and softening the harshness of life in a world that could be unpredictable and often unforgiving. As opium moved westward into Rome, it found a culture that valued both practicality and indulgence. Romans used opium in their medicines, mixing it with wine and honey to soothe ailments and ease discomfort. These mixtures were administered carefully, often in small doses, to ensure relief without overwhelming the senses. The plant was respected for its power, but also treated with caution, for ancient doctors understood that too much could dull the mind and bind the will. In Roman daily life, opium was also a companion to rest and comfort. Imagine a quiet afternoon in a Roman villa, sunlight streaming through open windows, where a family might use opium-infused remedies to calm fevers, ease aches, or simply lull a restless child into sleep. It was gentle, almost invisible, yet profoundly effective. The Romans, like the Greeks before them, recognized the delicate balance between its utility and its potential dangers. Opium's influence was not confined to medicine. Across these cultures, it began to seep into social rituals and philosophical thought. Greek philosophers considered its effects on the mind, pondering how altered states could deepen understanding or inspire insight. In Rome, writers and poets often referenced its calming or dreamlike influence, capturing in words the subtle interplay between relief, imagination, and the quiet beauty of altered consciousness. Trade continued to carry opium farther. From Greece and Rome, it moved along the Mediterranean, finding its way into new lands and cultures. It traveled with merchants and travelers, sometimes as a carefully prepared medicinal extract, sometimes as a simple dried resin. Communities far from Mesopotamia or Egypt began to discover its gentle effects, incorporating it into their own remedies, rituals, and daily lives. The plant became a quiet thread weaving through civilizations, connecting distant peoples with a shared understanding of its power. In parallel, knowledge about opium was slowly being codified. Physicians began to write down their observations, noting both the benefits and the risks. They experimented with combinations of herbs, wine, and other ingredients, refining methods to maximize its soothing qualities while minimizing harm. This accumulation of knowledge created a subtle, enduring legacy. The idea that a natural substance could be carefully managed, respected, and used to enhance life, rather than dominate it. Yet, even in antiquity, there were hints of its double-edged nature. Stories circulated of people who became overly reliant on opium, losing their vitality or clarity of mind. Philosophers debated the ethical and practical implications of using such a powerful plant. Was it a gift from the gods, to be harnessed wisely, or a dangerous indulgence that could cloud judgment and weaken resolve? These questions were never fully answered, but they reflected a deep human understanding. That power, even gentle power, requires care, awareness, and respect. In ancient Egypt, Greece, and Rome, opium also carried symbolic meaning. It was associated with sleep, dreams, and the thin veil between life and the unknown. Priests and healers sometimes used it in spiritual or ceremonial contexts, believing it could connect humans to the divine or guide the soul toward calm reflection. Its presence in these sacred spaces reinforced the idea that opium was more than a medicine. It was a companion to thought, meditation, and the quiet contemplation of life itself. By the time the plant had firmly established itself in these ancient cultures, it had developed a remarkable versatility. It could ease physical pain, calm the mind, inspire creativity, or facilitate spiritual reflection. It was practical and mystical, simple and profound. People began to understand that its value lay not just in what it could do for the body, but in how it could gently shape the mind, encourage reflection, and foster a sense of calm in a complex, often chaotic world. Trade and cultural exchange ensured that opium's reach continued to expand. From the Mediterranean, it traveled east along caravan routes, reaching India and beyond. Each culture it touched adapted its use to local needs and beliefs. In India, it became an ingredient in Ayurvedic remedies. In Greece and Rome, it was woven into medical, literary, and philosophical practices. Despite differences in context, one thread remained constant. Opium was quietly influential, a gentle presence in human history. Even as empires rose and fell, opium endured. Its early centuries in antiquity reveal a subtle truth, that human societies have always sought comfort, inspiration, and understanding through natural means. And among all the herbs and remedies discovered, opium held a special place, a plant capable of touching both body and mind, of easing suffering while opening doors to imagination and contemplation. By the end of antiquity, the journey of opium was already remarkable. From Mesopotamia to Egypt, Greece to Rome, it had become more than a medicinal plant. It was a thread connecting civilizations, a gentle force shaping health, culture, and even thought. Its story in these early centuries reminds us that even small, quiet influences can ripple through time, leaving lasting marks on human history. Opium's legacy in antiquity set the stage for the next chapters. Trade expanding across continents, empires entwined with its commerce, and societies grappling with its pleasures and perils. What began as a simple remedy in humble fields and candlelit huts was about to become a force that shaped politics, economics, and global culture. And so, the journey continues, quietly, steadily, like the flow of a gentle river carrying both promise and caution across the world. Trade carried more than silk, spices, and precious metals. It carried stories, ideas, and a small, powerful plant that would quietly shape civilizations. The poppy. As the ancient world grew more connected, long caravan routes began to weave their way across continents. Among these, the Silk Road stood out, a network of paths stretching thousands of miles from the fertile valleys of China to the bustling cities of the Mediterranean. Along these routes traveled merchants, travelers, and pilgrims, carrying treasures, knowledge, and a quiet but potent passenger, opium. Imagine the caravans winding through deserts, mountains, and river valleys, their camels steady and patient, the sun warm on the travelers' backs. Silk and spices might clink in wooden chests, but nestled carefully alongside were jars and pouches of dried poppy resin. It was a commodity both practical and exotic, valued for its ability to heal, calm, and sometimes intoxicate. In the quiet moments of rest, merchants themselves might take small amounts, easing the aches of long journeys, calming the mind after days of heat and dust. In India, opium had already been cultivated for medicinal purposes. Ayurvedic physicians used it in carefully measured doses, combining it with herbs, honey, and other natural ingredients to soothe pain and calm the spirit. But along the Silk Road, this medicinal practice began to mingle with new ideas. Travelers from distant lands brought stories of its effects in Mesopotamia, Greece, and Rome, and with each telling, the plant became more than a local remedy. It became a shared treasure, a thread connecting distant cultures. China, in particular, would soon feel the influence of opium more deeply than anywhere else. Though initially introduced for medical purposes, it arrived with new knowledge and techniques from traders, along with the subtle allure of foreign goods. The plant moved quietly into Chinese society, appreciated for its calming properties and its ability to ease suffering. In the hands of healers, it was medicine. In the hands of the curious, it became something more, a means to drift into contemplation, reflection, or even gentle escapism. The Silk Road was not just a passage of goods, it was a passage of culture. With opium traveled stories, rituals, and ideas about its use. In the bustling caravanserais, travelers shared tips for cultivation, methods for preparing resin, and even poetry inspired by its dreamlike effects. Merchants exchanged not only the plant itself but also the wisdom of centuries, subtly influencing medical practices, spiritual beliefs, and daily life across vast distances. As opium moved west and east, it became part of the rhythm of trade and travel. Picture a night under the stars in the Gobi Desert, a caravan resting, the soft murmur of camels, the flicker of fires, and the gentle preparation of opium-infused remedies. Travelers and traders alike found comfort in its calming touch, allowing weary bodies and minds a moment of pause before continuing their long journey. Its quiet presence was a constant companion, linking countless lives across deserts, mountains, and cities. In India, opium was revered as part of both medicine and ritual. Farmers carefully tended the poppy fields, aware of the plant's power and potential. They harvested its latex with patience, taking only what was needed, and preserved it for healing and preparation. Ayurvedic texts describe its applications for calming the nervous system, reducing pain, and easing distress. This careful, thoughtful use contrasted with the way opium would later be commercialized, showing that its early history was one of respect and mindfulness. As it traveled, opium also began to shape trade relationships and economies. The plant's value was recognized by merchants and rulers alike. Its movement along the Silk Road created subtle connections between regions, linking far-off lands through commerce and knowledge. In this way, opium became more than a plant. It became a catalyst for cultural exchange, a gentle but persistent force shaping human interaction and understanding. In China, opium initially remained a medicinal and spiritual tool. Healers incorporated it into remedies for pain, insomnia, and anxiety, while scholars sometimes referenced its calming or dreamlike effects. However, as trade increased, more people gained access to the plant, and curiosity about its effects grew. What had started as a simple medicinal aid slowly became a feature of social life, foreshadowing the widespread use and eventual societal impact that centuries of trade would bring. Opium's journey along the Silk Road also highlights the interconnectedness of human civilization. Just as silk-inspired fashion and spices transformed cuisine, opium transformed medicine, ritual, and even imagination. Each culture it touched adapted it in its own way, yet across all these lands, one truth remained. This small plant held the power to calm, to inspire, and to connect. It traveled quietly, threading through lives and societies, leaving traces that would endure for millennia. Even the preparation and use of opium varied across regions. In some areas, it was carefully measured and combined with other herbs. In others, it was smoked or ingested for more immediate effects. Despite these differences, the respect for its potency was universal. Early traders and physicians alike understood that while opium could heal and soothe, it also demanded care, attention, and wisdom. Through all this movement, opium became a subtle bridge between worlds. It connected empires, cities, and cultures in ways that were often invisible but deeply influential. By easing pain, calming minds, and inspiring contemplation, it created a shared human experience that transcended geography. Traders and travelers may not have realized it at the time, but with every caravan and every careful dose, opium was quietly shaping the trajectory of civilizations, preparing the world for the social and political consequences that would follow in later centuries. The Silk Road reminds us that even small, quiet forces can carry immense power. A plant, nurtured by farmers and carried by traders, became more than a remedy. It was a thread linking distant cultures, a companion to thought and reflection, a gentle force quietly shaping human history. Opium's journey along these ancient trade routes set the stage for future transformations, entering empires, influencing commerce, and eventually becoming central to conflicts and societal change. From the sun-warmed fields of India to the bustling markets of China and the far reaches of the Mediterranean, opium had traveled thousands of miles, quietly touching lives along the way. Its story is a reminder that the world's most profound influences often arrive softly, carried on the winds of trade and curiosity. And as we move forward into China's ancient courts and the eventual rise of opium dens, remember this: the plant's journey along the Silk Road was not just about commerce, it was about connection, culture, and the subtle ways a small seed can ripple across the world. A foreign plant, a domestic problem. China's encounter with opium would quietly reshape its culture, medicine, and society for centuries to come. As opium traveled along the winding paths of the Silk Road, it eventually reached the vast and fertile lands of China. Caravans carried more than silk, spices, and precious stones. They brought with them knowledge, stories, and this small, powerful plant. Initially, it was a curiosity, a medicinal herb from distant lands, quietly entering the lives of healers, scholars, and the elite. Imagine the mountain passes and river valleys of China as merchants journeyed from the west, jars of dried poppy resin tucked carefully in their packs. The plant arrived as part of trade, valued not for its recreational potential but for its medicinal uses. In those early days, opium was treated with respect, a gentle tool in the hands of skilled practitioners who understood the delicate balance between benefit and harm. Chinese physicians began to study opium with curiosity and caution. They experimented with it in controlled doses, using it to soothe pain, calm the spirit, and induce sleep for the sick and weary. Healers prepared the resin carefully, combining it with herbs and other ingredients in measured amounts, ensuring that it aided recovery without overwhelming the mind. In the quiet treatment rooms, patients rested under the gentle influence of the plant, experiencing a soft relief that was both physical and emotional. But opium's presence in China extended beyond medicine. Its arrival sparked curiosity and experimentation. Scholars debated its properties, exploring not only how it affected the body but also how it influenced the mind. Some were fascinated by its calming effects, seeing it as a bridge between physical relief and introspective thought. Others approached it with caution, aware that even a small dose could have unforeseen consequences. This duality, a plant both useful and potentially dangerous, would echo throughout China's history for centuries. In the courts of ancient China, opium was appreciated for its exotic origins. The elite occasionally used it in small amounts, intrigued by its calming effects and the stories of its power from distant lands. Yet, for most of the population, it remained a medicinal tool, carefully administered and respected. Its spread was gradual, subtle, and deliberate, as the knowledge of its uses filtered slowly through cities, towns, and villages. Farmers in China began cultivating the poppy in small, controlled plots, learning techniques from travelers and merchants who shared knowledge of its preparation. The cultivation itself became a careful practice. Workers gently scored the pods to collect the resin, ensuring the plant's continued health and potency. They understood that its power was quiet but persistent, a force to be treated with respect. In these early years, opium remained a companion to medicine, healing, and ritual, far from the widespread recreational use that would emerge later. Trade with India and Central Asia reinforced opium's presence in China. Merchants exchanged techniques for preparation, methods for measuring doses, and even stories about its calming effects. In bustling market towns, travelers and traders shared knowledge of opium's uses, creating an informal network of information that complemented its physical movement across the land. It was both a commodity and a source of knowledge, quietly weaving its influence into Chinese society. Opium also found a place in cultural and spiritual life. Healers sometimes used it in ceremonial practices, believing it could enhance meditation, aid sleep, or ease the mind during reflection. Its calming effect on the body was mirrored in its subtle influence on the spirit, allowing moments of quiet introspection and gentle contemplation. In this way, opium became not just a medicine, but a companion to thought, ritual, and reflection, threading its way into the rhythms of daily life. Despite its initial medicinal focus, there were early signs of curiosity about opium's more intoxicating effects. Some individuals experimented with smoking small amounts, exploring the sensations it could produce. Though not widespread at first, these experiments planted the seeds of a cultural shift that would unfold over centuries. It was a gentle reminder that even the most carefully controlled substances can take on lives of their own when curiosity, opportunity, and social dynamics converge. The Chinese understanding of opium in these early centuries reflected a balance of respect and experimentation. Physicians, scholars, and the elite recognized its benefits and limitations, applying it thoughtfully within their communities. They observed its calming effects, measured its potency, and recorded their experiences for future generations. This period represents the beginning of a long and complex relationship between China and opium, a relationship that would evolve from medicine to recreation, and eventually, to political and social challenge. By the time opium had firmly established itself within China, it had traveled thousands of miles from its origins in Mesopotamia and India. Along the way, it had passed through countless hands, been carefully measured, studied, and respected. In China, it became a tool for healing, a companion to thought, and a symbol of the connections forged by trade. Its presence was subtle, yet profound, a small plant quietly influencing medicine, culture, and social life. Opium's arrival in China also illustrates a broader truth about human history: that knowledge, curiosity, and commerce move together, shaping societies in ways that are often invisible at first. A plant that began as a simple remedy traveled along trade routes, entered a vast and sophisticated civilization, and quietly began to leave its mark. Its influence would grow over time, touching not only health and ritual, but eventually commerce, politics, and everyday life. Even in its earliest years in China, opium had begun to leave a subtle imprint on the culture. It was medicine, a tool for reflection, and a companion for calm. Farmers, physicians, and scholars alike respected its power, carefully tending and using it. Yet beneath this calm surface, the plant's potential for transformation and disruption quietly awaited. The story of opium in China teaches us that even gentle, controlled influences can ripple outward in unexpected ways. What begins as a simple medicinal plant can evolve into something far more significant when curiosity, trade, and human ambition intersect. China's introduction to opium was the start of a long, complex journey, one that would see a humble resin travel from fields and caravan paths into the very heart of empire. And so, as we move forward into the next chapters, the transformation of opium into recreational use, and the social changes it would bring, remember this: even the quietest beginnings can grow into profound influence, shaping societies in ways that are both gentle and enduring. Medicine turned into obsession. China's gentle introduction to opium was about to transform into something far more pervasive. For centuries, opium in China had been a careful companion to medicine and ritual, a measured tool in the hands of healers, physicians, and thoughtful individuals. Its use was quiet, controlled, and purposeful. But as trade expanded and cultural curiosity grew, a subtle shift began. The gentle medicinal plant was slowly finding its way into everyday life, not as a treatment for the sick, but as a source of pleasure, relaxation, and social enjoyment. Picture the quiet streets of Chinese towns in the early centuries, lanterns glowing softly against twilight, markets bustling with merchants and travelers. Among the goods being exchanged, silk, spices, tea, traveled something more elusive: the knowledge of smoking opium. It was introduced in small amounts, sometimes as curiosity, sometimes as a new method of using the familiar resin. What had once been dissolved in medicine was now transformed, inhaled as vapor, filling the lungs with a gentle warmth that soothed the body and calmed the mind. Opium dens began to appear, small, intimate rooms where people gathered to share conversation, stories, and the calming effects of the plant. Imagine low tables and soft cushions, the air scented with faint smoke and candle wax, quiet voices mingling with the soft rhythm of calm. Here, opium was no longer only medicine, it was social, recreational, a shared experience that could transport the mind to dreamlike reverie. It became a way to pause, to step out of the pressures of daily life, and to find a gentle escape in the company of others. Initially, this transformation was subtle. Scholars, merchants, and the curious experimented cautiously, aware of the plant's power. They noted how a small dose could ease tension, spark introspection, and foster conversation. Artisans might smoke to relax after a long day, while poets and thinkers explored the foggy, meditative states it inspired. It was both personal and communal, a shared ritual that offered calm while also inspiring creativity and reflection. Yet, as with any powerful substance, the line between controlled use and indulgence was thin. The more people discovered the pleasurable sensations of smoking opium, the more it spread. Curiosity led to experimentation, and experimentation led to routine use. What began as a medicinal aid became increasingly social, recreational, and ultimately addictive. Families, communities, and cities gradually felt the quiet but persistent influence of the plant. Its effects could soothe, but they could also subtly alter behavior, dependency forming almost invisibly over time. The dens themselves became spaces of cultural significance. They were quiet refuges from the outside world, places where conversation, poetry, and reflection intertwined with the gentle haze of opium smoke. Patrons would recline on cushions, inhaling the vapor and drifting into soft contemplation. Some found inspiration for painting, writing, or meditation. Others simply found comfort, a momentary respite from the demands of life. In these serene spaces, opium became a companion to both mind and spirit, a plant that eased the body while opening doors to imagination. Merchants and traders noticed the growing popularity, and the cultivation of opium began to expand accordingly. Farms that had once produced small amounts for medicinal purposes now increased production to meet rising demand. Techniques for harvesting, drying, and preparing the resin were refined, ensuring consistent quality and potency. The plant's transformation from controlled medicine to recreational commodity was gradual, almost imperceptible, yet unstoppable. It had quietly shifted from healer to companion, from medicine to indulgence. The societal effects of this transformation were subtle at first, then increasingly noticeable. People began to structure parts of their daily lives around opium, its consumption, its preparation, and the rituals that accompanied it. For some, it was a calming interlude. For others, it became a more constant presence. Families observed the plant's effects with a mixture of respect and concern, noting its benefits and its hidden costs. Communities began to recognize that while opium could offer comfort and reflection, it could also quietly alter the rhythms of life, shaping behavior and priorities over time. Cultural attitudes reflected this duality. On one hand, opium was admired for its calming, almost mystical qualities. Artists, poets, and scholars praised its effects, weaving references into literature, painting, and storytelling. On the other hand, careful observers recognized its potential for dependency, cautioning against excessive indulgence. This tension, between admiration and caution, use and abuse, would define China's evolving relationship with opium for centuries to come. By the late Ming and early Qing dynasties, opium had firmly established itself as a recreational substance in China. Its social use spread across cities and provinces, from private homes to communal dens, touching lives in subtle but profound ways. The plant, which had arrived quietly along trade routes, had transformed into a cultural force, shaping habits, social interactions, and even local economies. Its presence was pervasive, yet gentle, like a soft tide influencing the patterns of life without immediate notice. The transformation of opium into a recreational substance illustrates a timeless human tendency, the desire to explore, to experiment, and to seek comfort beyond necessity. What begins as curiosity or medicinal practice can, over time, evolve into a broader social phenomenon. In the case of opium, the change was gradual, subtle, and often invisible to those living through it. But its impact would be far-reaching, touching generations and eventually influencing politics, commerce, and society on a grand scale. By the end of this chapter, we see the quiet but undeniable shift in opium's role within China. From a medicinal tool in the hands of healers, it became a source of social enjoyment, personal reflection, and gentle escape. Opium dens, community rituals, and individual experimentation transformed it from medicine into a cultural phenomenon, weaving its calming influence into the fabric of everyday life. Yet beneath the surface, this transformation carried a subtle warning. Even the gentlest pleasures can become pervasive when curiosity, habit, and availability intersect. The seeds of recreational use, planted quietly through trade and experimentation, were growing into something much larger, something that would shape not only daily life but entire empires in the centuries to come. As we move forward into the next chapters, we will see how commerce, ambition, and politics would intertwine with this small but powerful plant, transforming it from a gentle companion into a force capable of reshaping societies. For now, let us pause and reflect on the quiet journey of opium in China, a journey from medicine to pleasure, from curiosity to culture, and from subtle influence to enduring legacy. Commerce meets conquest. The story of opium takes a decisive turn as trade, ambition, and empire intertwine. By the 17th century, opium had already carved its quiet path across Asia. It was cultivated, traded, and carefully used, first as medicine, then as a recreational indulgence. Yet the small plant that soothed pain and inspired reflection was about to enter a world where commerce and empire would amplify its influence, where its gentle presence would become a force shaping nations. At the heart of this transformation stood the British East India Company. Picture the bustling ports of India, where merchants and officials oversaw ships laden with cotton, tea, spices, and other valuable goods. The British East India Company had long been a dominant force in trade, linking the Indian subcontinent to the far reaches of Asia and Europe. By the early 1700s, the company realized that opium, carefully cultivated in India, could become a highly profitable commodity. Its medicinal and recreational uses in China offered an opportunity to turn a small, humble plant into a tool of economic ambition. The company began cultivating poppies across India, particularly in regions like Bengal and Malwa. Indian farmers, guided by company officials, carefully tended the fields, ensuring that the plants produced the potent latex needed for trade. The process was meticulous. Workers scored the pods at precise times, collected the resin, and dried it for shipment. Every stage required attention, patience, and respect for the plant's delicate nature. Yet behind this careful cultivation was a growing tension. The transformation of opium from local medicine to global commodity, controlled by distant powers with profit as their primary goal. Once harvested, the opium was prepared for shipment to China. Merchants loaded barrels onto ships, which sailed across the Bay of Bengal and into the South China Sea. Alongside the familiar goods of trade, textiles, spices, and porcelain, the resin traveled quietly, unassuming yet profoundly influential. In the ports of southern China, opium began to enter the hands of traders and, eventually, the local population. What had been a medicinal tool and social indulgence was now part of an international commercial web, linking continents and cultures in a new, complex way. The British East India Company did not simply trade opium, they actively managed its flow. Officials regulated cultivation, oversaw production, and coordinated shipments with precision. They understood the plant's dual power. It could calm, entertain, and heal, but it could also create dependence and drive demand. Their focus, however, was on profit, and the economic potential of opium was immense. As barrels of resin flowed from India to China, the company amassed wealth that would fund further expansion, military campaigns, and the growth of empire. In China, the increasing availability of opium began to transform daily life. The gentle, social use of the plant that had begun centuries earlier now faced a new force: a surge of imported opium, produced on a massive scale. Dens became more common, social use more widespread, and the plant's influence extended beyond elite circles into broader segments of society. What had once been a carefully controlled, almost sacred tool of medicine and ritual was now becoming a commodity that subtly reshaped social habits, economies, and communities. The British East India Company's involvement also had political consequences. By controlling the cultivation, production, and shipment of opium, the company became a powerful player in the interactions between India, China, and Britain. Trade disputes, smuggling, and local resistance occasionally arose, revealing the tensions between commerce and morality, profit and well-being. Through these subtle conflicts, the plant's journey was no longer only cultural or medicinal. It was entwined with governance, diplomacy, and the emerging forces of global politics. Imagine the long months of shipment, with sailors navigating monsoon winds and treacherous waters, each barrel of opium a carefully calculated investment. Merchants monitored every transaction, ensuring that the resin reached Chinese markets where it could fulfill its economic promise. For the company, opium was not merely a plant. It was a strategy, a key to power and wealth that extended far beyond the Indian subcontinent. Its influence was now global, subtle yet far-reaching, touching lives, governments, and economies across continents. At the same time, the human aspect of opium's journey continued to unfold. Farmers, merchants, and consumers were all connected through the plant's cultivation and trade. Farmers in India devoted themselves to its careful growth, understanding the delicate nature of the poppy. Chinese consumers experienced its effects, often unaware of the long chain of labor, trade, and politics that brought the plant to their doorsteps. And British officials oversaw its movement, recognizing both its power and its potential as a tool of profit. The story of opium had become layered and complex, weaving together human ambition, curiosity, and commerce. Yet, despite the scale and sophistication of this trade, the plant itself remained constant, gentle, potent, and transformative. Its influence on mind and body, on social and economic systems, was quiet but undeniable. The British East India Company had expanded its reach, linking the opium-producing fields of India with the bustling ports of China and the global ambitions of empire. Opium had become a bridge between continents, a catalyst for commerce, and a subtle force that would shape history in ways that few at the time could fully comprehend. The British East India Company transformed opium from a regional plant into a global commodity, quietly weaving it into the fabric of international trade. What had begun as medicine and social indulgence now became part of an economic empire, linking India, China, and Britain in a web of commerce, power, and influence. The cultivation, shipment, and sale of opium set the stage for dramatic social and political changes, showing how a simple plant could become a tool of empire. This chapter reminds us that history often unfolds in subtle ways. A humble plant, carefully cultivated and traded, can ripple across continents, connecting people, economies, and governments. Opium, gentle yet potent, had begun its transformation from medicine to global commodity, quietly reshaping the world while the tides of commerce and ambition carried it onward. And as we move into the next chapter, the First Opium War, we will see how the intersection of trade, addiction, and politics would escalate into conflict, showing the profound consequences of this small, unassuming plant. For now, let us reflect on the quiet power of opium under the hands of empire, a plant that traveled from fields to ports, from farmers to kings, subtly shaping the currents of history. When trade turned to gunfire, a small plant's journey would spark conflict, reshaping nations and the course of history. By the early 19th century, opium had traveled thousands of miles, from the sun-drenched fields of India to the teeming markets and opium dens of China. Its gentle influence on mind and body had become widespread, and yet, the quiet pleasures and commerce surrounding the plant were beginning to create tensions that were hard to ignore. The rise of opium as a commodity, combined with its growing social use, was setting the stage for one of history's first great conflicts over a drug, the First Opium War. In China, officials grew increasingly concerned about the consequences of widespread opium consumption. Addiction was spreading quietly, affecting individuals, families, and even local economies. Social unrest began to appear, subtle at first, then more pronounced. Families worried about the health and behavior of their loved ones, while local authorities saw declining labor productivity and the strain on social order. The plant that had arrived centuries earlier as a gentle medicine and social indulgence now carried shadows of dependency and disruption. The Chinese government, under the Qing dynasty, attempted to respond. Imperial officials issued edicts banning the importation of opium, ordering local authorities to enforce strict control, and imposing severe penalties for those caught smuggling the drug. Commissioner Lin Zexu, a determined and morally driven official, emerged as a key figure in this effort. He famously wrote letters to foreign merchants and took decisive action to suppress the opium trade, famously seizing and destroying vast quantities of the resin in Guangzhou. From the perspective of British merchants and the East India Company, however, opium was not just a plant, it was a source of enormous profit. They had invested heavily in its cultivation in India and in its shipment to Chinese ports. To them, the Qing government's restrictions threatened both commerce and empire. Tensions between profit and policy, between cultural responsibility and economic ambition, were quietly building toward an inevitable clash. By 1839, these tensions erupted into conflict. The First Opium War began, not as a sudden explosion, but as a series of escalating confrontations between British forces and Chinese authorities. Chinese officials attempted to enforce their bans, seizing shipments and arresting traders, while the British, equipped with advanced naval technology and a determination to protect trade, responded with military force. The war was marked by both strategy and tragedy, a collision of cultures, economies, and political will, all revolving around a small, seemingly humble plant. The conflict revealed the far-reaching power of opium, not just as a drug, but as a symbol of commerce, imperial ambition, and human desire. British forces, with their superior ships and weaponry, quickly gained the upper hand. Ports were blockaded, cities threatened, and Chinese resistance, while fierce in spirit, struggled against the technological advantages of the foreign powers. The war, though brief, exposed vulnerabilities in the Qing dynasty and reshaped the balance of power in the region. At the heart of this conflict was the human cost. Lives were disrupted, families affected, and communities strained under the pressure of addiction, trade, and war. The quiet influence of opium, once limited to medicine and modest social use, had transformed into a catalyst for geopolitical upheaval. It was a reminder that even gentle, natural substances can have profound consequences when commerce, politics, and human ambition intersect. The Treaty of Nanking in 1842 formally ended the First Opium War, imposing significant concessions on China. Hong Kong was ceded to Britain, tariffs were adjusted, and trade restrictions were lifted in favor of British commercial interests. The treaty symbolized the shifting power dynamics between East and West, highlighting how a simple plant had become central to international relations, commerce, and military strategy. Imagine the quiet streets of Guangzhou after the conflict, the smoke of cannon fire fading, families cautiously rebuilding, merchants negotiating the new rules of trade. Opium remained, now entwined with political agreements and the realities of empire. Its influence had expanded from medicine and social use to the center of global commerce and diplomacy, illustrating the subtle yet transformative power of a plant that had traveled centuries and continents to arrive at this pivotal moment. Yet, despite the conflict and upheaval, the plant itself remained unchanged, its resin, potent and quiet, continuing to calm, soothe, and inspire. The war revealed that opium's influence was both immediate and enduring. It affected not only the body and mind, but also the social, economic, and political structures that humans build. A single plant, cultivated with care in India, could ripple through centuries and empires, leaving marks far beyond what its early cultivators could have imagined. The First Opium War also set a precedent for the intertwining of commerce, addiction, and conflict. It showed how economic interests could clash with moral and social concerns, and how the pursuit of profit could drive political and military action. Communities, governments, and individuals were all caught in this web, illustrating the complex interplay of human desire, ambition, and the quiet yet powerful effects of a plant. For ordinary people, the consequences were tangible. Families confronted addiction, communities adjusted to new social patterns, and economies felt the ripple effects of trade disruptions. For rulers and officials, the war highlighted the limits of enforcement and the challenges of balancing public health with political and economic realities. Opium had quietly, almost invisibly, become a force capable of shaping nations, and the First Opium War was its first major demonstration. By the end of the First Opium War, the quiet journey of a simple plant had transformed into a powerful force influencing empires. Opium had moved from medicine to recreation, from trade to war, and from personal indulgence to political upheaval. The conflict revealed the intricate ways in which commerce, human desire, and governmental authority intersect, demonstrating that even a small, humble substance can leave profound marks on history. The First Opium War was not the end of the story, it was a turning point. It foreshadowed further conflicts, greater international entanglements, and deeper social consequences. The gentle plant that once soothed the sick and inspired quiet reflection had now entered the realm of empires, diplomacy, and global influence, showing that even the most unassuming forces can shape the course of human history. As we move into the next chapter, the Second Opium War, we will see how these tensions escalated, how opium's influence continued to expand, and how nations struggled to balance commerce, power, and morality. For now, let us reflect on this quiet truth. Even a plant, soft and unassuming, can carry within it the power to reshape civilizations. Conflict escalates quietly, yet profoundly. Opium's influence would once again bring nations to the brink of war. The First Opium War had left a mark on China, a combination of lost territory, imposed trade agreements, and a rising awareness of the plant's power. Yet the story of opium was far from over. Its journey was about to enter a new, even more turbulent chapter, the Second Opium War. Once again, a small plant would become entwined with commerce, diplomacy, and conflict, showing how deeply a substance could shape the course of nations. Following the Treaty of Nanking in 1842, Britain had gained significant commercial advantages in China. Trade restrictions were eased, tariffs were lowered, and ports previously closed to foreigners were opened. However, both British and French traders were eager for more. They sought greater access, more favorable terms, and continued opportunities to profit from opium and other commodities. At the same time, the Chinese government, still wary of the plant's social consequences, attempted to maintain control, creating a delicate and often tense balance between commerce and regulation. In the mid-1850s, tensions began to escalate. Disputes over tariffs, trading rights, and diplomatic representation created a volatile environment. Smuggling of opium continued despite official bans, and local authorities struggled to enforce restrictions amid growing demand. Commissioner Lin Zexu's successors had attempted to curtail the trade, but foreign powers were persistent, their naval technology and political leverage tipping the balance in their favor. What had begun as a moral and social concern had now transformed into a complex international challenge. The Second Opium War officially began in 1856, sparked by incidents involving the boarding of Chinese vessels and the detention of foreign sailors. Britain, determined to protect and expand its commercial interests, joined forces with France, another imperial power seeking influence and economic advantage in Asia. The conflict was marked by a combination of diplomacy, coercion, and military engagement. Once again, opium, the seemingly gentle plant, lay at the heart of international struggle, symbolizing the clash of economic ambition, national pride, and human desire. Imagine the quiet rivers and bustling ports of southern China, now under the shadow of foreign gunboats. Families watched as ships moved along the waterways, carrying soldiers, merchants, and opium alike. The plant, which had once been cultivated with care and used for medicine, now served as a driving force behind global strategy. Its economic value gave merchants and empires reason to fight, while its social effects on local populations added pressure and complexity to the conflict. Military campaigns unfolded across key regions, with foreign forces advancing on coastal cities and key trading hubs. The combination of superior naval technology, organized supply lines, and strategic planning allowed Britain and France to exert pressure on Chinese authorities. Yet, behind the scenes, the war was not only about guns and ships. It was about influence, trade, and the delicate, often invisible power of a plant that had traveled thousands of miles from its origins. Conflict escalates quietly, yet profoundly. Opium's influence would once again bring nations to the brink of war. The First Opium War had left a mark on China, a combination of lost territory, imposed trade agreements, and a rising awareness of the plant's power. Yet the story of opium was far from over. Its journey was about to enter a new, even more turbulent chapter: the Second Opium War. Once again, a small plant would become entwined with commerce, diplomacy, and conflict, showing how deeply a substance could shape the course of nations. Following the Treaty of Nanking in 1842, Britain had gained significant commercial advantages in China. Trade restrictions were eased, tariffs were lowered, and ports previously closed to foreigners were opened. However, both British and French traders were eager for more. They sought greater access, more favorable terms, and continued opportunities to profit from opium and other commodities. At the same time, the Chinese government, still wary of the plant's social consequences, attempted to maintain control, creating a delicate and often tense balance between commerce and regulation. In the mid-1850s, tensions began to escalate. Disputes over tariffs, trading rights, and diplomatic representation created a volatile environment. Smuggling of opium continued despite official bans, and local authorities struggled to enforce restrictions amid growing demand. Commissioner Lin Zexu's successors had attempted to curtail the trade, but foreign powers were persistent, their naval technology and political leverage tipping the balance in their favor. What had begun as a moral and social concern had now transformed into a complex international challenge. The Second Opium War officially began in 1856, sparked by incidents involving the boarding of Chinese vessels and the detention of foreign sailors. Britain, determined to protect and expand its commercial interests, joined forces with France, another imperial power seeking influence and economic advantage in Asia. The conflict was marked by a combination of diplomacy, coercion, and military engagement. Once again, opium, the seemingly gentle plant, lay at the heart of international struggle, symbolizing the clash of economic ambition, national pride, and human desire. Imagine the quiet rivers and bustling ports of southern China, now under the shadow of foreign gunboats. Families watched as ships moved along the waterways, carrying soldiers, merchants, and opium alike. The plant, which had once been cultivated with care and used for medicine, now served as a driving force behind global strategy. Its economic value gave merchants and empires reason to fight, while its social effects on local populations added pressure and complexity to the conflict. Military campaigns unfolded across key regions, with foreign forces advancing on coastal cities and key trading hubs. The combination of superior naval technology, organized supply lines, and strategic planning allowed Britain and France to exert pressure on Chinese authorities. Yet, behind the scenes, the war was not only about guns and ships. It was about influence, trade, and the delicate, often invisible power of a plant that had traveled thousands of miles from its origins. It wasn't just the East that felt opium's gentle pull. Across Europe, the West was discovering the quiet power of this ancient plant. While China grappled with the growing presence of opium and the turmoil of the Opium Wars, the West was quietly embracing the plant in its own unique ways. In Victorian England, France, and other parts of Europe, opium's influence traveled not along battlefields, but through medicine, literature, and the intimate corners of daily life. It was a plant that moved softly yet profoundly, shaping thought, health, and creativity across societies far removed from the bustling ports of China. In England, opium first arrived through trade and colonial networks. Merchants returning from India carried dried resin and laudanum, a tincture made by dissolving opium in alcohol. This preparation became a common household medicine, prescribed for everything from headaches to coughs, and even used as a soothing agent for children and the elderly. Imagine the quiet Victorian drawing rooms, mothers tending to their children with a few drops of laudanum, patients reclining in upholstered chairs, the soft aroma of the tincture mingling with the scent of tea and candlelight. Opium's presence was gentle, calm, and seemingly beneficial. Victorian physicians, in particular, were fascinated by opium's effects. They studied it as a potent analgesic, an agent that could ease pain and quiet the body. Surgeons relied on it before anesthesia became widespread, while doctors recommended it for insomnia, anxiety, and digestive troubles. Opium's ability to soothe the body made it an invaluable tool in medicine, yet its more subtle effects on the mind, relaxation, dreaminess, and introspection, added an unexpected layer to its influence. Patients often reported calm, contemplative states, and even mild euphoria, which made the plant a quietly powerful companion in daily life. But opium's influence in the West extended beyond medicine. It seeped into literature, art, and culture, inspiring both fascination and caution. Poets and writers like Samuel Taylor Coleridge and Thomas de Quincey explored the dreamlike states it could produce, weaving its effects into works of imagination and introspection. De Quincey's Confessions of an English Opium Eater, for example, offered readers a glimpse into the subtle, hallucinatory experiences opium could provide, blending personal reflection with literary artistry. The plant became a muse for creativity, gently opening doors to altered perception and quiet contemplation. Artists, too, found inspiration in opium's effects. Painters and illustrators explored themes of dream, fantasy, and altered states, capturing in their work the soft haze and introspective calm that opium could evoke. Its presence in salons and studios allowed creative minds to experiment with new ideas, blending the gentle influence of the plant with personal insight and expression. Opium became a subtle bridge between the physical and the imaginative, a quiet companion to thought and creativity. At the same time, opium's recreational use was quietly expanding. Though more common among the upper and middle classes, awareness of its pleasurable effects began to spread through society. Small gatherings, private indulgences, and intellectual circles experimented cautiously with its use, appreciating its calming, introspective qualities. While addiction was less visible than in China, the plant's potential for dependence was already being recognized by careful observers. Opium's journey to the West also intertwined with commerce and colonial influence. British and Dutch trading networks ensured a steady flow of the plant from India and Asia, linking distant farms to European markets. Merchants recognized its value not only as medicine but as a commodity capable of influencing markets, households, and culture. Its presence in Europe was both tangible, in tinctures, powders, and pills, and symbolic, representing the connections between East and West, commerce and curiosity, medicine and pleasure. The social and cultural consequences of opium in the West were subtle but significant. It quietly reshaped daily routines, influenced health practices, and inspired literature and art. Families incorporated it into home medicine cabinets, doctors prescribed it for a variety of ailments, and writers and artists explored its introspective effects. Though not yet a source of large-scale conflict, opium's presence in Europe foreshadowed future challenges, highlighting the delicate balance between benefit and risk, use and dependency. One of the most remarkable aspects of opium's influence in the West was its duality. On one hand, it offered calm, relief, and inspiration. On the other, it carried the quiet potential for addiction, dependency, and social disruption. This tension reflected a broader truth about the plant. Its power was subtle, pervasive, and capable of shaping both individual lives and cultural currents. The West was only beginning to understand its depth, just as China and other regions were experiencing the profound consequences of its trade and social use. Opium's influence also reveals the interconnectedness of human societies. A plant cultivated in distant fields could ripple across continents, touching households in London, salons in Paris, and study rooms in Edinburgh. Knowledge, trade, and cultural fascination ensured that opium's presence was not limited to one region. It became a thread linking distant civilizations, a subtle but persistent force shaping medicine, literature, and social habits. By the mid-19th century, opium had firmly established itself in Western culture. Its medicinal value was undeniable, its literary and artistic influence profound, and its presence in daily life quietly transformative. Yet, as in China, the plant's expansion carried a subtle warning. Even the gentlest substances, when widely used and traded, could produce consequences that echoed far beyond individual households. Opium had become a global phenomenon, a bridge between cultures, commerce, and human experience. Opium's journey to the West demonstrates how a humble plant can quietly reshape societies, even continents away from its origins. It provided relief to the sick, inspiration to the creative, and calm to the weary. Yet, at the same time, it carried the potential for dependency, subtly influencing daily life, social habits, and cultural expression. The West experienced opium differently than China, with medicine, literature, and art guiding its use and perception. Yet the underlying truth remained the same. A plant capable of calming the body and mind could ripple outward, connecting human desire, curiosity, and commerce across the globe. Opium's influence was now truly global, bridging East and West, medicine and art, commerce and culture. As we move into the next chapter, exploring the human and societal costs of addiction, we will see how this gentle plant, admired and utilized across continents, also shaped communities, families, and individuals in profound and sometimes heartbreaking ways. For now, we pause to reflect on opium's quiet journey across the world, its subtle power, and its enduring influence on both mind and society. Beneath the trade and treaties, a quiet human struggle unfolded, the shadow of opium's influence touching lives in subtle, profound ways. By the mid-19th century, opium had traveled far from its origins in distant fields. It had woven itself into medicine, culture, art, and commerce. Yet alongside its calming and creative uses, a quieter, more troubling story was emerging, one of dependency, human vulnerability, and social consequence. Addiction, subtle at first, was now shaping lives, families, and communities in ways that were difficult to reverse. Imagine the streets of cities across China and Europe, where opium dens coexisted with tea houses, clinics, and private homes. Inside these dens, the smoke curled gently around low tables and soft cushions. Patrons reclined, inhaling the vapor and letting their minds drift into calm, dreamlike states. The atmosphere was soothing, almost meditative, yet the gentle haze hid a more persistent truth. The plant that could comfort and inspire could also subtly bind the mind and body, creating a dependence that grew quietly over time. Families noticed the effects first in small ways: longer hours spent resting or smoking, diminished productivity, moments of forgetfulness, or sudden irritability when access to opium was delayed. Friends and neighbors began to whisper about the influence of the plant, noting how it could take a gentle curiosity and transform it into habitual use. What had once been a recreational indulgence or medicinal aid was evolving into a persistent, sometimes all-consuming presence in daily life. In China, the social consequences became increasingly visible. Addiction was no longer confined to the elite or to urban centers. It began affecting laborers, farmers, and communities reliant on productivity and cooperation. Work slowed, families struggled to maintain routines, and local authorities faced a growing challenge in maintaining order. The plant's influence, once subtle and personal, was now shaping the structure of society itself. European societies experienced addiction in different ways, often intertwined with medicine and domestic life. Laudanum, a tincture of opium, was widely prescribed for children, the elderly, and patients recovering from illness. Its calming effects were valued, yet repeated use could lead to dependency, creating a cycle that was hard to break. Physicians and observers recognized the tension between benefit and risk, noting how a plant designed to heal could quietly alter behavior, mood, and daily routines. Stories of individuals struggling with opium's hold began to appear in literature, letters, and newspapers. They revealed the personal costs. Moments of introspection turned to obsession, gentle calm became habitual reliance, and creativity or relaxation could sometimes give way to a fog of need. Families were torn between admiration for the plant's benefits and concern for its subtle, pervasive power. These accounts provide a window into the human dimension of addiction, showing how a small, seemingly harmless plant could influence thought, behavior, and social relationships. Communities, too, felt the ripple effects. In towns and cities where opium dens proliferated, economic and social patterns shifted. Labor productivity sometimes declined, local disputes arose, and public health concerns grew. Authorities struggled to balance enforcement with compassion, recognizing that the plant's influence was deeply entwined with culture, commerce, and human desire. Addiction was not simply a private issue, it became a public concern, quietly reshaping communities in ways that were both visible and intangible. The psychological effects of opium were particularly complex. Users often described a calming, dreamlike state, a quiet escape from worry or pain. In moderation, these effects could be restorative, allowing time for reflection and rest. Yet when use became habitual, the same gentle haze could cloud judgment, erode motivation, and subtly reshape personality. Addiction was rarely sudden. It crept in quietly, leaving its mark over months or years, a slow transformation that could be difficult to reverse. Economic consequences were also intertwined with addiction. The trade of opium had created wealth for merchants and empires, yet the social and labor costs were significant. In regions where dependency became widespread, communities faced diminished productivity, increased poverty, and strain on families. The plant, which had traveled for centuries as medicine and pleasure, now had a dual impact. It fueled commerce while quietly reshaping social and economic systems. Cultural attitudes toward addiction were complex and varied. Some viewed dependency as a moral failing, others as a medical issue, and still others as a societal challenge tied to commerce and opportunity. In literature and art, addiction was explored as both fascination and cautionary tale, revealing the tensions inherent in a substance that could soothe, inspire, and bind in equal measure. Stories of opium's influence reflected broader concerns about human desire, the interplay of curiosity and habit, and the delicate balance between use and excess. Despite the challenges, human resilience was also evident. Families, communities, and physicians experimented with ways to manage and reduce dependency. Herbal remedies, alternative treatments, and social interventions were explored, often blending cultural tradition with emerging medical knowledge. Addiction was recognized as a complex phenomenon, requiring both understanding and compassion. Even amid the social disruption, people sought ways to navigate the plant's influence, balancing its benefits with its risks. By the end of this chapter, we see that opium's journey was not only one of trade, culture, and commerce, it was also a deeply human story. Addiction, subtle and persistent, touched families, communities, and individuals across continents. The plant that could heal, calm, and inspire also carried the potential to bind the mind and reshape daily life, leaving quiet but profound marks on society. The story of opium and addiction teaches us that even the gentlest forces can have lasting effects. A plant that traveled centuries and continents, once used for medicine and recreation, became a subtle agent of social and personal transformation. Understanding this human dimension allows us to appreciate the full complexity of opium's legacy, as both a source of comfort and a challenge to the societies it touched. As we move into the next chapter, exploring the ways opium influenced art, poetry, and cultural expression, we will see how creativity and human imagination intertwined with the plant's quiet, persistent power. For now, we pause to reflect on the delicate balance between benefit and dependence, curiosity and habit, and the profound ways a single plant can shape lives and societies. How did art reflect opium's quiet power? Across continents and centuries, creativity intertwined with the gentle haze of this mysterious plant. Opium's influence extended far beyond medicine, recreation, and commerce. By the 19th century, its gentle transformative power had begun to leave an indelible mark on culture, on poetry, painting, and literature, where human imagination met the quiet, dreamlike effects of the plant. In smoke-filled dens, candlelit parlors, and quiet study rooms, opium became both muse and mirror, inspiring creativity while reflecting the subtle tensions of desire, addiction, and introspection. In China, the soft, curling smoke of opium dens influenced literature and visual arts. Poets and writers captured the surreal, introspective states induced by the plant, weaving references to dreamlike journeys, gentle haze, and fleeting moments of reflection into their verses. These works explored themes of escape and contemplation, often portraying the opium experience as both soothing and subtly cautionary. Imagine a quiet scholar, seated by a lantern, inhaling gentle clouds of vapor as he pens a few lines of poetry, a moment suspended in time where creativity and opium intersect. Painters, too, were inspired by opium. Landscapes and portraits often conveyed a dreamlike quality, a softened perception of reality that echoed the plant's calming influence. Gentle brushstrokes, muted colors, and ethereal atmospheres captured both the serenity and the melancholy associated with opium use. These visual expressions offered viewers a glimpse into a world partially shaped by the plant's subtle effects, a world where imagination and contemplation flowed naturally, unhurried by the pressures of daily life. In Europe, opium's cultural imprint was equally profound. Writers such as Thomas de Quincey explored its introspective and hallucinatory qualities in deeply personal accounts. His Confessions of an English Opium Eater described not only the calming and euphoric effects of the plant, but also the reflective and sometimes haunting visions it inspired. Readers were drawn into dreamlike worlds, where the boundaries between reality and imagination became soft, fluid, and contemplative. Opium, gentle in its physical effects, became a gateway to creative exploration and intellectual curiosity. Artists in the West, much like their counterparts in China, found opium's influence a source of inspiration. Painters, illustrators, and writers explored altered perception, inner reflection, and surreal imagery. From quiet sketches inspired by moments of calm to elaborate narratives depicting dreamlike journeys, the plant's influence permeated cultural expression. It became a muse, not in the chaotic sense of modern stimulants, but as a gentle companion guiding thought, emotion, and introspection. Music, too, reflected opium's soft touch. Composers and performers often drew inspiration from the dreamlike states and gentle emotions associated with the plant. Melodies slowed, rhythms softened, and harmonies became more introspective, echoing the quiet calm and contemplation induced by opium. Across mediums, the plant served as a bridge between physical experience and creative expression, linking human sensation with artistic output. Yet, alongside admiration, there was caution. Cultural depictions often carried subtle warnings about the plant's dual nature. While opium could inspire, soothe, and enhance creativity, it could also ensnare, subtly influencing habits and perceptions. Poets, writers, and visual artists frequently acknowledged the tension between benefit and risk, weaving these themes into their works. Art became a lens through which to understand the human fascination with opium, capturing both the allure and the potential consequences of its gentle, persistent power. In literature, the plant often symbolized introspection, escape, and the fluid boundaries between reality and dream. Characters might recline in smoke-filled rooms, drifting through visions of distant lands, personal memories, or imagined worlds. These narratives were not sensational. They were calm, reflective explorations of human thought and experience, shaped by the quiet influence of opium. Readers, like the writers themselves, were invited into gentle contemplation, to observe the interplay of mind, body, and imagination in a softened, immersive way. In painting, visual cues echoed these themes. Soft lighting, muted tones, and gentle forms conveyed dreamlike calm. Artists captured moments of introspection and creative flow, inviting viewers to share in the reflective space opium seemed to create. In these works, the plant was both subject and silent partner, a quiet, transformative presence influencing perception and mood. Across continents, opium's cultural footprint illustrates a fundamental truth. Even a small, simple plant can shape not only daily life but the collective imagination of societies. Its calming, reflective, and intoxicating qualities allowed artists, writers, and thinkers to explore human consciousness in ways both personal and universal. Through literature, painting, music, and poetry, opium became a medium for understanding thought, emotion, and the subtle contours of human experience. Importantly, these cultural depictions also reveal human curiosity and the desire to explore altered states of consciousness. Opium's effects were gentle, often introspective, and rarely violent in artistic representation. The plant provided a doorway to reflection, offering both inspiration and insight into the human mind. Yet, as with all things powerful, its influence carried a quiet tension between calm and obsession, creativity and dependency, imagination and reality. The widespread presence of opium in cultural expression underscores its global impact. From the smoke-filled dens of China to the drawing rooms of Victorian England, from poetic verses to visual art, the plant became a subtle but pervasive influence on how humans perceived and expressed themselves. Its presence transcended medicine and commerce, shaping thought, emotion, and creative exploration across time and space. By the end of this chapter, we see that opium's influence on culture was profound yet subtle. It became a muse for writers, poets, painters, and musicians, inspiring creativity and reflection while simultaneously reflecting the tensions of dependency and desire. Across East and West, art captured the quiet power of a plant that could calm, inspire, and transform perception. Opium's cultural depictions reveal the intimate connection between human imagination and external influence. A gentle plant, traveling across continents and centuries, became a lens through which creativity and introspection could flourish. Its presence in art and literature reminds us that even subtle forces, whether smoke, resin, or human curiosity, can leave lasting marks on the collective consciousness. As we move into the next chapter, global regulation begins. We will explore how nations responded to the widespread use and influence of opium, balancing commerce, addiction, and morality in a world increasingly aware of the plant's power. For now, we pause to reflect on the quiet, enduring imprint of opium on human culture, a gentle haze shaping imagination and creativity across the globe. When the world finally drew a line, opium's quiet influence became a matter not only of health, but of international law and cooperation. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the story of opium had stretched across continents, centuries, and societies. From ancient medicine to the dens of China, from Victorian parlors to global commerce, opium had left its mark on individuals and empires alike. Yet, as its influence grew, so did the recognition of the challenges it posed. Addiction, trade disputes, and social disruption prompted a new chapter, the era of global regulation. Governments and international bodies began to acknowledge that opium could no longer be treated solely as a local or domestic concern. Its trade and use were intertwined with commerce, diplomacy, and social welfare, demanding coordination across borders. Early attempts at regulation were cautious, measured, and deliberate, an acknowledgement that a plant, gentle yet potent, could ripple across nations in ways both seen and unseen. The first efforts toward control were often led by nations directly affected by trade and addiction. China, still recovering from the upheavals of the Opium Wars, continued to advocate for limits on importation and stricter domestic enforcement. European powers, initially resistant, began to recognize the social and political costs of widespread opium use, particularly as public awareness grew about the human impact of addiction. These converging concerns laid the groundwork for cooperative international approaches. One of the earliest significant steps came with treaties aimed at standardizing trade and limiting harmful practices. Nations negotiated agreements to control the production, export, and import of opium, balancing economic interests with public health concerns. The focus was on creating mechanisms to monitor trade, prevent abuse, and encourage responsible use for medical purposes. These early treaties demonstrated a growing global awareness. Opium was no longer simply a commodity or a cultural practice, it was a matter of shared responsibility. International conferences in the early 20th century further formalized these efforts. Diplomats, medical experts, and government officials gathered to discuss standards, share research, and develop strategies for regulation. They recognized that effective control required both scientific understanding and social cooperation. Policies were developed to monitor cultivation, manage trade, and restrict non-medical use, aiming to reduce addiction and its consequences while preserving legitimate medicinal applications. In India, a primary source of opium, the British administration implemented strict oversight. Cultivation was controlled, production carefully measured, and shipments monitored for compliance with emerging international agreements. Farmers followed prescribed practices, ensuring that the resin was harvested and processed according to regulations designed to prevent excessive diversion to non-medical markets. This meticulous attention reflected the delicate balance between commerce, control, and responsibility. China continued its efforts to limit domestic consumption while participating in global negotiations. Education campaigns, local enforcement, and cooperation with foreign governments helped to reduce some aspects of illicit trade. Yet, challenges remained. Smuggling, social dependency, and cultural attachment to the plant meant that regulation was never simple, requiring continuous adaptation and engagement from authorities. In Europe and North America, governments also began to establish legal frameworks for opium control. Pharmacists, doctors, and public health officials collaborated to regulate medicinal use, limit recreational access, and educate the public. Opium was increasingly recognized as a substance requiring careful oversight, even as it retained its value for pain relief and medical treatment. The growing understanding of its dual nature, healing and addictive, shaped laws and policies in ways that balanced benefit with risk. Public awareness played a key role in these efforts. As information about addiction, social consequences, and international trade circulated through newspapers, journals, and scholarly works, societies became more attuned to the complexities of opium use. The plant that had once been admired, feared, or simply taken for granted now occupied a space in public consciousness where caution, responsibility, and ethical concern were paramount. Citizens and policymakers alike began to see regulation not as restriction alone, but as a means to protect communities while maintaining legitimate medicinal applications. The era of global regulation also introduced new institutions and mechanisms for monitoring and enforcement. Agencies were established to track production, oversee trade, and report compliance. International cooperation became a defining feature, as nations recognized that opium's influence did not respect borders. Scientific research, data collection, and diplomatic engagement combined to create a framework that, for the first time, treated opium as both a social and international issue. Yet, regulation was never solely about restriction. It was about understanding. Medical research continued to explore opium's beneficial properties, while social scientists examined its impact on communities. Governments and experts worked to differentiate between medicinal use, recreational use, and abuse, creating nuanced policies that acknowledged the plant's complexity. Regulation became a dialogue, a calm, considered effort to balance human need with social responsibility. As global frameworks developed, the legacy of centuries of trade, culture, and addiction informed every decision. Policymakers understood that opium's influence was layered. It was economic, social, cultural, and psychological. Efforts to control it required subtlety and cooperation, rather than blunt enforcement. The plant's quiet, persistent power demanded a response that was equally thoughtful, measured, and careful, a recognition that history, medicine, and human desire were all intertwined. By the end of this chapter, it is clear that the global regulation of opium marked a turning point in the plant's history. From local cultivation and domestic use to international treaties and coordinated enforcement, nations recognized the subtle but profound impact of this simple plant. Regulation sought not only to limit harm, but also to preserve its beneficial uses, reflecting the dual nature that had defined opium for millennia. The story of regulation demonstrates that even substances gentle in themselves can have far-reaching consequences, requiring thoughtful human management. Opium's journey, from ancient medicine to global commodity, from social indulgence to cause of war, and finally to regulated substance, shows the enduring interplay between human desire, commerce, and responsibility. As we move into the next chapter, Modern Medicine and the Opioid Legacy, we will see how opium's influence continues into the present day, transformed into modern pharmaceuticals, yet carrying echoes of its historical journey. For now, we pause to reflect on the quiet wisdom of regulation, a gentle reminder that understanding, cooperation, and care can guide the use of even the most potent natural forces. The plant lives on, in new forms, its ancient journey continuing quietly in medicine, society, and our understanding of pain. From ancient fields in Mesopotamia and Egypt, to the opium dens of China, and the parlors of Victorian Europe, opium has traveled centuries, shaping societies and human experience. By the 20th century, its journey entered a new phase: modern medicine. The same plant that soothed, inspired, and sometimes ensnared humanity was transformed into carefully measured pharmaceuticals, becoming both a tool of healing and, subtly, a reminder of its complex legacy. The discovery and isolation of morphine in the early 19th century marked a turning point. Morphine, named after Morpheus, the Greek god of dreams, captured opium's calming power in a purified form. It allowed doctors to administer precise doses for pain relief, particularly in surgery and battlefield medicine. Imagine a patient lying quietly after a procedure, the haze of discomfort lifted by the gentle power of morphine, an evolution of the ancient plant's role, now guided by science and careful observation. Soon after, codeine was isolated, another derivative of opium, offering a gentler, milder relief for coughs and minor pain. These compounds were celebrated for their ability to relieve suffering, demonstrating opium's enduring medicinal value. For centuries, humans had sought the plant's soothing effects. Now, modern chemistry allowed these effects to be harnessed predictably, efficiently, and safely, or at least, as safely as any powerful substance could be. The pharmaceutical era of opium did more than provide relief. It created new avenues for understanding the human body, pain, and addiction. Doctors and scientists studied opioid receptors in the brain, learning how these compounds interacted with our nervous systems. The plant's influence shifted from anecdotal and cultural observation to systematic, clinical study. Humanity's relationship with opium became more deliberate, more structured, yet its subtle power remained undeniable. Despite the promise of modern medicine, the legacy of dependency persisted. Even carefully measured morphine and codeine could lead to addiction if misused. As hospitals and households incorporated these drugs, doctors observed patterns reminiscent of historical opium use: subtle habituation, craving, and a psychological bond with the plant's effects. The duality remained, healing and harm intertwined in a delicate balance that required constant vigilance and understanding. In the 20th century, the development of semi-synthetic opioids, like oxycodone and hydrocodone, expanded the plant's reach even further. Pain management became increasingly sophisticated, yet the principles of careful dosing and monitoring were essential reminders of opium's historical lessons. The plant's ancient journey, once a quiet companion in rituals, medicine, and trade, had now become a cornerstone of modern healthcare, connecting centuries of human experience with the ongoing quest to alleviate suffering. Societies around the world witnessed the benefits of these new medicines. Chronic pain, surgical recovery, and palliative care were transformed by opioids, offering relief and comfort to millions. Hospitals, clinics, and homes integrated these compounds into daily life, guided by doctors' careful observation and modern pharmacology. Yet alongside these benefits, echoes of history whispered, even the gentlest substances could carry unexpected consequences if misused, reminding humanity that caution and knowledge must always accompany healing. The opioid legacy also includes cultural and social reflections. Opioid use has shaped how societies perceive pain, illness, and medical intervention. The gentle haze that inspired artists, poets, and writers centuries ago now exists in clinical settings, where controlled administration provides relief, dignity, and calm. The connection between human experience, scientific understanding, and historical precedent remains profound. A plant cultivated millennia ago continues to influence modern life in ways both tangible and subtle. Medical research has sought to balance relief and risk, learning from centuries of human interaction with the plant. Doctors now understand how tolerance develops, how dependence can occur, and how careful monitoring can prevent harm. The lessons of history, addiction, commerce, culture, and social impact inform the use of opioids today, guiding policies, prescription practices, and patient education. Knowledge of opium's journey is no longer academic. It is practical, vital, and profoundly human. Opioids have also sparked social awareness, debates, and policy considerations. Governments, public health organizations, and communities navigate the tension between pain relief and potential misuse. The plant's long history reminds us that even well-intentioned use requires mindfulness, that medicine is intertwined with human desire, and that the impact of a small, humble substance can ripple across lives, families, and societies. In reflecting on this legacy, it is important to consider both the continuity and transformation of opium's influence. The plant that once soothed ancient ailments, inspired artists, and fueled trade conflicts is now part of carefully structured medical practice. Its essence remains, a potent natural compound capable of shaping human experience, connecting past and present, and teaching lessons about responsibility, curiosity, and the power of nature. The story of modern opioids illustrates a recurring truth: human desire, need, and innovation are deeply intertwined with natural forces. The ancient plant that traveled across empires, trade routes, and centuries continues to shape lives today. Its journey, from fields and dens to clinics and hospitals, reflects humanity's persistent quest to understand, harness, and balance the forces we encounter in nature. By the end of this chapter, we see that opium's legacy is both enduring and evolving. It has moved from ancient remedies to modern pharmaceuticals, from cultural inspiration to clinical necessity. The plant's influence is a reminder that even gentle, natural substances can have far-reaching consequences, offering healing, reflection, and, at times, challenges that require careful attention. The journey of opium and its derivatives, morphine, codeine, oxycodone, illustrates the delicate balance between benefit and risk, medicine and dependency, past and present. Understanding this history allows us to appreciate not only the power of the plant, but the wisdom of careful stewardship, informed use, and human responsibility. As we move into the next chapter, Lessons from History, we will reflect on what opium's journey teaches us about desire, commerce, power, and human nature. For now, we pause to appreciate a gentle truth. Even a small seed, cultivated and refined over millennia, can carry within it the quiet power to transform lives, shape societies, and endure across time. Societies around the world witnessed the benefits of these new medicines. Chronic pain, surgical recovery, and palliative care were transformed by opioids, offering relief and comfort to millions. Hospitals, clinics, and homes integrated these compounds into daily life, guided by doctors' careful observation and modern pharmacology. Yet alongside these benefits, echoes of history whispered, even the gentlest substances could carry unexpected consequences if misused, reminding humanity that caution and knowledge must always accompany healing. The opioid legacy also includes cultural and social reflections. Opioid use has shaped how societies perceive pain, illness, and medical intervention. The gentle haze that inspired artists, poets, and writers centuries ago now exists in clinical settings, where controlled administration provides relief, dignity, and calm. The connection between human experience, scientific understanding, and historical precedent remains profound. A plant cultivated millennia ago continues to influence modern life in ways both tangible and subtle. Medical research has sought to balance relief and risk, learning from centuries of human interaction with the plant. Doctors now understand how tolerance develops, how dependence can occur, and how careful monitoring can prevent harm. The lessons of history, addiction, commerce, culture, and social impact inform the use of opioids today, guiding policies, prescription practices, and patient education. Knowledge of opium's journey is no longer academic. It is practical, vital, and profoundly human. Opioids have also sparked social awareness, debates, and policy considerations. Governments, public health organizations, and communities navigate the tension between pain relief and potential misuse. The plant's long history reminds us that even well-intentioned use requires mindfulness, that medicine is intertwined with human desire, and that the impact of a small, humble substance can ripple across lives, families, and societies. In reflecting on this legacy, it is important to consider both the continuity and transformation of opium's influence. The plant that once soothed ancient ailments, inspired artists, and fueled trade conflicts is now part of carefully structured medical practice. Its essence remains, a potent natural compound capable of shaping human experience, connecting past and present, and teaching lessons about responsibility, curiosity, and the power of nature. The story of modern opioids illustrates a recurring truth: human desire, need, and innovation are deeply intertwined with natural forces. The ancient plant that traveled across empires, trade routes, and centuries continues to shape lives today. Its journey, from fields and dens to clinics and hospitals, reflects humanity's persistent quest to understand, harness, and balance the forces we encounter in nature. By the end of this chapter, we see that opium's legacy is both enduring and evolving. It has moved from ancient remedies to modern pharmaceuticals, from cultural inspiration to clinical necessity. The plant's influence is a reminder that even gentle, natural substances can have far-reaching consequences, offering healing, reflection, and, at times, challenges that require careful attention. The journey of opium and its derivatives, morphine, codeine, oxycodone, illustrates the delicate balance between benefit and risk, medicine and dependency, past and present. Understanding this history allows us to appreciate not only the power of the plant, but the wisdom of careful stewardship, informed use, and human responsibility. As we move into the next chapter, Lessons from History, we will reflect on what opium's journey teaches us about desire, commerce, power, and human nature. For now, we pause to appreciate a gentle truth. Even a small seed, cultivated and refined over millennia, can carry within it the quiet power to transform lives, shape societies, and endure across time. Why look back now? Because the quiet story of opium carries wisdom for understanding human desire, power, and the choices we make. As we trace the centuries-long journey of opium, from ancient medicine and ritual, to trade and conflict, to modern medicine and culture, we begin to see patterns that extend beyond a single plant. Its story is more than a tale of addiction or commerce. It is a mirror reflecting the ways humans interact with the natural world, with each other, and with the delicate balance between curiosity and caution. One of the most enduring lessons is the interplay between human desire and unintended consequences. Opium's effects, gentle and calming at first, inspired both admiration and dependence. People sought relief, comfort, and insight, yet the same plant quietly reshaped societies, economies, and even empires. The threads of personal choice and societal impact are woven together, showing that even small actions, like cultivating a poppy or consuming a tincture, can ripple outward, creating effects that touch countless lives. Trade and commerce also emerge as central themes in opium's history. From Mesopotamian merchants to the British East India Company, the plant's economic value has driven decisions that altered nations. Profits and politics were entwined, and the pursuit of wealth often overshadowed social or moral considerations. The opium trade reminds us that commerce is never neutral. It carries consequences that extend beyond markets, influencing culture, governance, and human relationships. Power, too, is a recurring element. Governments and empires used opium to influence populations, secure strategic advantage, and shape diplomacy. Wars were fought over access to the plant, treaties signed to manage its trade, and policies developed to control its social impact. Opium's quiet potency became a tool for both authority and subversion, illustrating that even seemingly gentle substances can wield immense influence when combined with human ambition. Yet, through all these lessons, the human dimension remains central. Addiction, dependence, and social disruption are not just abstract consequences, they are lived experiences. Families were affected, communities altered, and individual lives reshaped by the plant's persistent power. The historical record reminds us that policies, commerce, and culture intersect with personal experience, and that understanding this interplay is crucial for making informed decisions in any era. Another profound insight from opium's story is the resilience and adaptability of human societies. Nations eventually recognized the need for regulation, implementing treaties, education campaigns, and medical oversight. Communities experimented with remedies and social interventions to mitigate dependency. Even in the face of widespread use and addiction, people sought ways to balance the benefits of the plant with its risks. This adaptability is a quiet testament to human ingenuity, reflection, and cooperation. Cultural and artistic expressions further illuminate the human relationship with opium. Literature, poetry, painting, and music captured the introspective and dreamlike states the plant could induce, offering insight into both personal experience and societal perception. Art became a bridge between the physical effects of the plant and the imagination of its users, showing that even substances can shape thought, creativity, and human perception in subtle but profound ways. Perhaps one of the most calming and enduring lessons is the continuity of human curiosity. Across continents and centuries, people have observed, experimented with, and reflected upon opium. From ancient Sumerians to Victorian poets, from Chinese physicians to modern medical researchers, humanity has sought to understand its effects, benefits, and risks. This persistent curiosity demonstrates the timeless desire to explore, learn, and adapt, a gentle reminder that our engagement with the world is ongoing, layered, and reflective. History also teaches balance and mindfulness. The story of opium is not one of simple condemnation or glorification, it is a story of nuance. The same plant that eased pain could induce dependence, that inspired art could disrupt lives, that fostered trade could spark conflict. Recognizing complexity, rather than oversimplifying, allows us to approach both natural substances and human choices with calm awareness and informed care. Opium's journey also highlights the importance of collective responsibility. Governments, communities, and individuals each played a role in shaping the plant's influence. Regulation, education, and social support became essential to mitigate harm while preserving benefit. The lesson here is subtle yet profound. Addressing complex challenges requires cooperation, reflection, and a willingness to act thoughtfully, principles that extend far beyond opium itself. Finally, opium reminds us of the enduring connection between past and present. Modern medicine, with morphine, codeine, and opioids, continues the story that began thousands of years ago. Addiction, healing, commerce, and culture are intertwined threads, demonstrating that history is not merely a record of events, but a living guide. By studying opium's journey, we gain insight not only into the past, but also into how to navigate challenges, relationships, and choices in the present. The quiet takeaway from this long history is one of awareness, compassion, and reflection. Opium's influence was never just about a plant. It was about people, societies, and the decisions that shape human experience. By observing the ways humans have interacted with opium across time, we can approach modern challenges with a calm understanding, mindful of the interplay between benefit, risk, curiosity, and consequence. By the end of this chapter, it becomes clear that opium's story offers lessons far beyond its chemical properties. It teaches us about desire, commerce, power, creativity, and resilience. It reminds us that even gentle forces can shape lives, societies, and civilizations. And it shows that understanding, reflection, and cooperation are essential to navigate the complex interplay between nature, culture, and human choice. History, in this sense, becomes more than a record. It is a guide. Opium's journey from ancient medicine to modern medicine, from inspiration to regulation, illustrates the continuity of human curiosity, the importance of balance, and the enduring consequences of our choices. These are lessons we can carry forward, gently shaping our understanding of the present and the future. As we move into the final chapter, Closing Reflections, we will gently summarize opium's journey across time, leaving viewers with a calm, reflective sense of awe at the subtle yet powerful ways a tiny seed can change the world. For now, we pause to absorb the wisdom of history, a story of curiosity, consequence, and the enduring impact of human engagement with the world around us. And so, a tiny seed changed the world, its journey touching empires, cultures, and the human heart in ways both gentle and profound. As we draw the story of opium to a close, it is worth pausing to reflect on the remarkable journey of this small, ancient plant. From its earliest cultivation in Mesopotamia to the dens and clinics of the modern world, opium has quietly, persistently shaped human history. Its path is a gentle thread weaving through time, touching lives, inspiring creativity, shaping economies, and challenging societies to understand the delicate balance between benefit and consequence. Imagine, for a moment, the first hands to harvest the poppy's resin thousands of years ago. Perhaps in the fertile plains of Mesopotamia, farmers noticed its calming properties, observing how it eased pain, soothed the weary, and transported the mind to quiet contemplation. From these humble beginnings, the plant's influence began to ripple outward, carried along trade routes, adopted by cultures, and embraced for both medicinal and recreational use. Over centuries, opium crossed oceans and continents. It became a part of religious rituals, a tool of healing, a commodity for trade, and, eventually, a source of contention in global politics. It inspired artists, poets, and musicians, who captured the plant's gentle yet transformative effects in literature, visual art, and melody. The soft haze of opium became a muse, bridging the gap between tangible experience and human imagination, offering insight into both the world and the inner workings of the mind. Yet, opium's journey was never one-sided. Its influence carried subtle, sometimes profound consequences. Addiction, social disruption, and political tension remind us that even the gentlest substances can hold power beyond immediate perception. Families and communities felt its effects, as did empires and nations. The plant's history is a mirror, reflecting the complex interplay between human desire, commerce, culture, and responsibility. As the centuries unfolded, societies learned to respond. Regulation, education, and public awareness emerged, reflecting humanity's growing understanding of the plant's dual nature. Modern medicine transformed opium into morphine, codeine, and other opioids, carefully harnessing its effects to alleviate suffering. Yet even today, its legacy continues to echo, reminding us that benefit and risk are often intertwined, and that careful stewardship is essential when dealing with powerful natural substances. What can we take from this long, intricate history? First, it teaches mindfulness. The story of opium illustrates that every action, cultivation, trade, use, has consequences. What may seem small or benign can ripple outward, shaping societies, cultures, and individual lives. Being aware of these connections allows us to approach life with calm reflection, recognizing both our influence and our responsibility. And so, a tiny seed changed the world, its journey touching empires, cultures, and the human heart in ways both gentle and profound. As we draw the story of opium to a close, it is worth pausing to reflect on the remarkable journey of this small, ancient plant. From its earliest cultivation in Mesopotamia to the dens and clinics of the modern world, opium has quietly, persistently shaped human history. Its path is a gentle thread weaving through time, touching lives, inspiring creativity, shaping economies, and challenging societies to understand the delicate balance between benefit and consequence. Imagine, for a moment, the first hands to harvest the poppy's resin thousands of years ago. Perhaps in the fertile plains of Mesopotamia, farmers noticed its calming properties, observing how it eased pain, soothed the weary, and transported the mind to quiet contemplation. From these humble beginnings, the plant's influence began to ripple outward, carried along trade routes, adopted by cultures, and embraced for both medicinal and recreational use. Over centuries, opium crossed oceans and continents. It became a part of religious rituals, a tool of healing, a commodity for trade, and, eventually, a source of contention in global politics. It inspired artists, poets, and musicians, who captured the plant's gentle yet transformative effects in literature, visual art, and melody. The soft haze of opium became a muse, bridging the gap between tangible experience and human imagination, offering insight into both the world and the inner workings of the mind. Yet, opium's journey was never one-sided. Its influence carried subtle, sometimes profound consequences. Addiction, social disruption, and political tension remind us that even the gentlest substances can hold power beyond immediate perception. Families and communities felt its effects, as did empires and nations. The plant's history is a mirror, reflecting the complex interplay between human desire, commerce, culture, and responsibility. As the centuries unfolded, societies learned to respond. Regulation, education, and public awareness emerged, reflecting humanity's growing understanding of the plant's dual nature. Modern medicine transformed opium into morphine, codeine, and other opioids, carefully harnessing its effects to alleviate suffering. Yet even today, its legacy continues to echo, reminding us that benefit and risk are often intertwined, and that careful stewardship is essential when dealing with powerful natural substances. What can we take from this long, intricate history? First, it teaches mindfulness. The story of opium illustrates that every action, cultivation, trade, use, has consequences. What may seem small or benign can ripple outward, shaping societies, cultures, and individual lives. Being aware of these connections allows us to approach life with calm reflection, recognizing both our influence and our responsibility. And so ends the quiet journey of opium, a tiny seed that traveled through empires, inspired art, shaped commerce, and continues to influence our world today. From ancient medicine to modern science, from dreamlike poetry to the structured care of medicine, its story reminds us of the delicate balance between curiosity, desire, and responsibility. Now, I have a question for you. Which part of opium's history surprised you the most? The ancient uses, the rise of addiction, the wars it inspired, or its influence on art and medicine? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your reflections. If you want to explore more calming stories that uncover the hidden threads of history, make sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and turn on the notification bell. Your support helps us create more relaxing journeys through the past, just like this one. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Take a deep breath, let the calm of history settle in, and remember, the smallest seeds can change the world in the most profound ways.